Okay, so I did a collage for my project, and the inspiration for the collage was actually this picture here. My daughter and I were in Paris last January. She's sitting here in our hotel lobby. And when we needed to do a project, I was inspired to do a collage based on this picture. As I've reflected, when I travel, I look very much like an American tourist. And I think she looks very European. And the jacket she's wearing in the picture, we had actually just gotten at a thrift shop in Paris, which made it even more Parisian. So, what I wanted to do is examine the outsiders in Paris and look at how an outsider experiences Paris. And I took this photo and took the original color and the black and white and turned it into one poster. So here's the finished project, the collage. At the top is the original color photo, and at the bottom is the black and white photo. And what I've done is create ideal Paris for the outsider and real Paris for the outsider, and went through the people and the text that we studied and the films, and then merged it with our own experience in Paris, the positive and the negative, the outsider and the insider. So I'll just take you through the collage, and then we'll bring my daughter on to get her reflections about being outsider or insider in Paris. So starting with us, in the upper left-hand corner, I have her looking at a piece of art at the Louvre and very engaged and connected, and really focused on the work. And I love this picture. And then in comparison to that, I took these images I had of the Mona Lisa. One is someone just holding up their camera to see it. It's just a room, crazed room full of people. And then this other I put next to it just is so funny to me because there's people looking at the Mona Lisa. She's all the way in the back, but they're not even facing the picture. There's one guy with a girl on his shoulders, some decorum issues there. And then everyone who's at the back is actually just looking at each other. They're not even looking at the Mona Lisa. So I felt like in this scene that my daughter Shira looks like the insider in Paris, and is able to focus on the art while the tourists are looking in their own way. And then, of course, the larger picture in our hotel lobby, the color is the ideal. That's the ideal outsider in Paris having an ideal Parisian experience. And then the black and white will be the reality, which is sometimes brutal and difficult. I also surrounded the collage with a frame of roses, because of Edith Piaf's Le Vie en Rose. And the roses at the bottom are white, reflecting the black and white and the darker side of Paris. And then the roses at top are the red, beautiful roses. So the first person that we studied that hit me in this way is Ernest Hemingway. So the Movable Feast of Paris that we read, and this kind of life that he led in Paris, which was so inspiring for him, was also complicated. You see him have rough moments with his wife and with friends and with drinking. And I took a black and white picture of Hemingway and his friends in Paris and made it color. And it looks kind of false, because it looks like this idyllic life that he had in Paris, but his internal life was more complicated. And what happens is that person who was an outsider in Paris as an American living this ideal experience, at the end of his life actually took his life. This is a picture of him with the shotgun when he lived back in the United States. He actually took his own life. So it's just a contrast between the ideal of Hemingway and this Parisian scene, and then what he comes to be at the end of his life that's there. So for me, that was really jarring to understand the external of Paris for Hemingway and how he looked at that time, and then what was going on with him internally. The next picture I have and is a picture of Edith Piaf, in color, surrounded by rose, her famous, song La Vie en Rose, and this very painful, complicated life that she led in Paris. Even though she wasn't fully an outsider, she ultimately was never at peace in Paris. And by the end of her life, and this is here, her on her deathbed here, and I gave her lots of roses for her Vie en Rose. On her deathbed here, we have the black and white, very sad kind of end of a life. So even if you're not an outsider in terms of being French, Parisian can, Paris can still not always be an idyllic place, as we saw with her life, La Vie en Rose. The same is true with Zazie. Zazie dans the Metro, while she's a fictional character, Zazie wants nothing else than to ride the metro when she comes to visit her uncle. She has an odd home life, maybe a somewhat neglectful mother, and comes to Paris, this scampish little girl. And all she wants is to ride the metro and spends all weekend in these escapades, very adult escapades for a little girl to be dragged along to with her uncle. And ultimately, the metro is on strike that weekend. And so she can't get on the metro. And so she is always an outsider because she never is able to get on to the metro. And so she ultimately does get on the metro at the end of the story, but by then she is asleep. So she never is awake to experience what it is like to be on metro. So she is an outsider wanting to be part of Paris and ride its system, but the reality of strikes, which are commonplace, is there. What gave me the idea to do this collage and this project was the French movie Breathless, with this incredible figure, New York Herald Tribune Patricia, selling these newspapers, and this like very adorable pixie-like American woman living in Paris, and it looks so idyllic. And in in the film that we watched a week after this, one of the characters says, "My first words were New York Herald Tribune." That's how infusive Breathless is in society. There wasn't as much freedom for French filmmakers. It's more government controlled. So once that opened up, you had more creativity in film, and you get a film like Breathless. But even the idyllic, and I colorized it. The film's in black and white, but again, falsely made it color to reflect that ideal outsider in Paris. But by the end, in Breathless, she becomes the betrayer, and she is the one who turns in her partner, or her lover, that is there, and this kind of reel that she gets sucked into really dirty, ugly Paris, and the killing of a police officer, and all these different things that are there. And then the hen, the hate. Is, again, these are the actors in color, because it was a very successful movie. And these are them in color, but the actual movie is also filmed in black and white, showing the darkness of Paris, and also perhaps how hard it is to be a young person, and a person who's not of originally born in Paris, but comes as an immigrant, and how you're treated. It's one man in the film is Jewish, one is Muslim, and one is Black, and they're all treated as outsiders, and have bad relationships with the police. And she's not on here because she's really a native, but Amelie, when that film was made, there was a lot of criticism about how Amelie looked. Is this the ideal Parisian woman, coming into a 21st century where there's a more diverse Paris? And La Haine, the hate is much more reflective of that. And then finally, I took my daughter's passport photo, and when I sprayed the Mod Podge on everything, it actually blurred the picture, which I thought was symbolic, because as much as we want to feel that we look Parisian, or we are Parisian, or we're part of Paris, that does Paris always make us feel like an outsider? And even do Parisians feel like outsiders in Paris? Is no one completely at home? So I've asked my daughter to come on for a minute. So Shira, if you'll turn on your camera, and just want to ask you, when you were in Paris, did you think about looking or being Parisian or trying to fit in a way? And everything I've gone through here, does it remind you anything about our trip?
Well, funnily enough, the photo you have of me taking a picture in the art gallery, with my like phone and having to document, when we're in the Louvre, kind of, you say it's from like an insider perspective, but I think I felt more like an outsider, and like the need to document something, like a memory, especially in, a typically like tourist, more tourist heavy museum like the Louvre. Me needing to document it with my phone kind of makes that photograph a souvenir in a way, and kind of makes me a tourist in Paris. But I think compared to the photo of me taken of me in the hotel room, where I'm more of the subject, and also I'm in clothing, that I bought from a thrift store in Paris. I feel like, to me, that is comparatively much more of me as an insider, or someone who's fitting in a bit better, in Paris, uh, and also just the background being, um, very like the architecture of Paris and the more classical, trimming of the walls, and kind of the images behind me and the photographs and paintings behind me. I feel like I'm much more of an insider, and wearing that jacket also, um, being something that I actually bought in Paris, helps to make me feel like I was fitting in. I think
Hmm.
my clothing allowed me to kind of pretend. I mean, clothing is like, often it is a costume, or it's a way of trying to present yourself. Um,
Hmm.
so wearing that jacket definitely helped me to feel like an insider. Often, clothing can give me confidence, or make me feel a certain way, or make me portray a certain personality. So I think
Hmm.
wearing that jacket, and also just the photo itself of me being the subject in, a back with a background that's very clearly Parisian, kind of it gives the illusion of me as someone who could be living in Paris. Whereas the other photo, both in the moment, and I think the photo itself of me taking a picture with my iPhone in the Louvre, there's a in comparison, it's much more of a American tourist needing to like document this memory, versus me kind of just in feeling sitting in this kind of environment. Uh,
In the lobby, yeah. Well, and that's what I did. So if it's not clear, what I did for the collage is I took the real pictures on the wall in the hotel lobby and then reframed. So all these pictures, I added some frames as well, but these are all reflective of the frames in the lobby. They're just replaced with other things. See, in my mind, you're so into it and, reflecting on the piece of art. And to me, like I compare that to this, um, Mona Lisa view where like no one's really looking at, like they just are checking it off a list. And I feel like you're more engaged, whether you're Parisian or not, you're more engaged in this. And then the last question I just want to ask you, because that's kind of what prompted the essays. I've always been like a leggings and sneakers traveler. Like I don't dress up to travel. I look American. I don't care if I look American. And I love your aesthetic. And as an architecture major, we've always talked about, and actually found this piece of yours which reminds me of the Arc de Triomphe a little bit. I don't know if you remember making this or not, but I found this from school. So this even has a European aesthetic about it. So there's something about your aesthetic and your style. That's it. So just, as a question, do you think in Europe, and then you spent the semester in Italy, do you naturally try and look European? Is it something you attempt to do, or it's just the style you like?
I think it's the style that I like. I think I
Mhm.
appreciate the care that Europeans often put into their clothing, um, uh, and kind of having more of an appreciation for art and design. I think that's what allows Europeans to care more about how they dress, and also just being surrounded by art and design allows once you're constantly surrounded by that, it allows you to have a better eye for things like that. So I don't even think. So I think yeah, it was something that I was made it happen naturally. I think of being in Europe, just seeing and being surrounded by people who are dressing well and just design in general, even if it's not clothing. It was you're over time you're gonna like somehow be affected by it, and it will sort of bleed into how you present yourself. So
And does the collage make sense to you based on our trip and what I've told you about class this semester?
what it makes sense.
Is it funny to you that I use the picture of you in the lobby as the basis for this, or does it make sense now that you've kind of heard me talk it through?
I think it makes sense. I think it's yeah, I think I like to think of myself as someone who tries to kind of put effort and like understand the culture of Europe and how I dress and having an appreciation of art, which I feel like a lot of Americans don't have as much.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, or we're just not. It's just not part of our. It's not as important in our education. Whereas, like when I was in Europe, I'd see like there's school trips of kids to art museums, and so I like to think of myself as someone who cares about that. And I think yeah, in the way that I present myself, or I think that hopefully it shows that I do have an appreciation for kind of the culture of Paris um, and all that comes with it.
And we need to go back for sure. All
Yeah,
right. Thank you so much. I love you. Thank you for talking to me today.
of course.
All right.
Thank you.
Il me parle tout bas, je vois la vie en rose. Il me dit des mots d'amour, des mots de tous les jours, que ça me fait quelque chose. Il est entré dans mon cœur une part de bonheur dont je connais la cause. C'est lui pour moi, moi pour lui dans la vie. Il me l'a dit, l'a juré pour la vie. Et dès que je l'aperçois, alors je sens dans moi mon cœur qui bat. Des nuits d'amour à plus finir, un grand bonheur qui prend sa place, des ennuis, des chagrins s'effacent, heureux, heureux, en mourir. Quand il me prend dans ses bras, il me parle tout bas, je vois la vie en rose.